gods, goddesses, spirits, God. There are many names for all these influences we have coming at us from the other world. And through different eras of time, they've taken a different emphasis. For instance, when religion was created and started to become quite popular, then God obviously was in vogue. And in earlier tribal times, spirits were in vogue. Well, in vogue, you know what I mean. Also, there have been times when we've used the word shadow. I've mentioned this before. Then shadows were in vogue. No one would talk about shadows today in the way they might have done in times gone by. They were once a great cause for concern. What is good to get your mind around, really, is the fact that the other world contains any number of different influences, and all of these will carry certain labels with them, but also they change shape as we go through time. So if you go back to the earliest primitive, primeval, prehistoric times, then you have, you got to wrap your mind around this, you have an influence coming to you that is a spirit. These spirits would be spirits of trees, spirits of air, earth, fire, water, rain, wind, sunlight, clouds, you name it, everything natural. Forests were heavy with spirits, a fact which literally everyone would have agreed upon. Tree faces could take something of a human form, although sometimes contorted and disfigured. Contorted and disfigured meant that you had quite a lot of power in earlier times. And that is what made witches so powerful. The uglier you were, the more contorted you were, the more powerful you would be. Generally, spirits took a form and a shape that you could recognise and put into context. Because everything then had a spirit, not spirit, but a spirit. So in a sense, it's individualised. The spirit is individualised rather than the people being individualised. I think the spirits were far more individualised the further we go back. These influences could be very strong and could carry elements of positivity and negativity, good luck, bad luck, hope, dreams, fears, anxieties, and it could also carry omens. So an influence is something that you took a lot of notice of, because if you didn't, then you would probably be considered to be a little bit asleep, a little bit out of it, you know, a little bit sort of gone off somewhere if you weren't taking much notice of the influences that you came across in everyday life, during the night, in all experience that you might have invited for yourself. The leaves of trees have always been especially influential, and I introduced this into one of my books of the long reflection when a major character, Leela Sky, had a leaf attached to his person and he didn't want to shake it off in case he got further bad luck. So that's what we started off with. This is what it's useful to remember. And if we fast forward to the creation of religion, I say the creation, and some people might think, was it created? Of course it was created. If we fast forward to the creation of religion, then we find ourselves with God, a one God. Carnribin developed the idea of the one God from the ancient sun god Ra. and this had the head of a falcon and a cobra encircling the disk of the sun. It all symbolised the ultimate power of the sun, without which no one on earth could live. One God and the many gods, and the one God and the many gods, and I think everyone started arguing over which was which and what was what and what we should prefer to worship. God gives us a problem, in my view, because although you could say it's a one higher power that is in everything that we have around us, and it takes many forms, what we've lost there is we've lost the character. From the character or the spirit in the kettle or the cauldron over your fire, to the character or the spirit in a nomad's tent. There was a character or a spirit in your sword, just as there was a character or a spirit in your boat. A character or a spirit would be in your horn, as much as within your broom, which you might use every single day. This meant we thought very differently about the world around us in earlier days. It meant we communicated and connected with the world, rather than worshipping an abstract concept of the world. Character or spirit is missing from our interaction with each other, but also our interaction with other forms of life. In a nutshell, there is no character or spirit left to forge the bonds we used to know long ago. Character is kind of eliminated. An abstract concept is far more easy to manipulate, causing an I'm right and you're wrong kind of attitude, which inevitably brings wars far more frequently to the world. I'm not saying people didn't fight the further back you go, but maybe they fought over different elements of life if they had spirit and character present within their lives, rather than man-made concepts which, quite clearly, led you nowhere. Because the power seems to take over, and that kind of power is very, very easy to manipulate. He, and of course it is a he, is somewhere above us, looking down on us, all-powerful, all-knowing. And the problem with this is there's no natural world character that the idea of God is based upon. As with an ancient spirit, which has character within it, there seems to be no character within the concept of God. I remember being quite freaked, thinking that there was this big, huge, ginormous person looking over me from the sky. I remember my cousin saying to me, "Look, if you look up there," this was at night, "you'll see his feet." She used to talk about God and Jesus like this. I'm sure it was to scare the living daylights out of me, and I was freaked at imagining this big, huge pair of feet hanging over me in the sky, which I think any child would really. Well, they might be fascinated, but I wasn't. I was totally freaked. But what we're talking about here is a huge power that is bigger than us. It's almost hard to fathom because the rules are made for humans only, seemingly for just one superior species. What's the advice from the Bible? Subdue the earth, not on your Nelly, as the saying goes. This mindset was very different in an earlier prehistoric tribal age. Rules only existed under the banner of something we call Carnribin, which I've talked about in my books. If you want to learn about that, just look at my books. In Coming Home to the Trees, I go over Carnribin and a wealth of spirits in the home and everywhere. This is a code of law that everything adheres to on Earth. That's all the beings that there is. And the beings of the other world, the spirits, adhere to those laws as well. So it's not so much you've got man-made rules, but you've got natural world-made rules. And these speak to us of how we need to live to be harmonious with the earth and to be harmonious with all the other beings on earth who are considered to be our cousins, and so that we make it all sustainable for the generations to come. And peace is at the centre of this. And when I say peace, I mean something that is harmonious to everyone, to every single being on earth, and that doesn't interfere or trifle with any of those aspects of the natural law that we all have to live with. And every nomadic person who lived on earth in prehistory would have known about this law. They probably wouldn't have sat and talked about it. What they would have done was done it in practice in their everyday lives. But that is at the heart of what a spirit influence, a characteristic of a spirit influence is all about. Clearly, some people who are religious are fine. It's not fine for me, but it could be fine for them. I have a problem with it when there's big feet in the sky. So we must remember that a time in history came when the spirits of the old natural world, the spirits in trees and rocks, the spirits that had been part of human life for literally tens of generations, were suddenly ousted, replaced by gods and goddesses of many shapes and forms. These answered, or were supposed to answer, the spiritual needs of ordinary people, those entering the new agricultural era and becoming the new high and lowly that would form within communities, springing up all over the civilized world. The very essence of these gods and goddesses shouted loud about power, human power, mostly man power. Ancient rock was suddenly taken from its natural place, arranged and rearranged for human purpose, when it never had been before. And with agricultural settlements becoming more widespread, we were no longer living off the land, but controlling the land. With an emphasis on the new written word, useful for restructuring new rules and laws. All was losing its earth-based connection, so our relationship with the natural spirits of the past was well and truly over. Humans were now destined to occupy a new individualised future, one we're very much still suffering from in our communities today. The cause of much of our loneliness and despair. It was the worst kind of destiny for those of us who wanted to cling on to the old ways. It was one where nothing could ever be the same as that which had sustained our earlier ancestors long ago. How it went in historical context, the fact that spirits were the original influences, followed by gods created by priesthoods and agricultural lifestyle, followed by a one god with prophets representing what that meant. Subduing the earth? Now we lived in a world of industry, commerce, and technology, where the natural world and her ancient spirits were pushed ever further away. In a nutshell, we were no longer connected to our natural roots. The amount of wars, the battles over land and claiming land, and everybody's going all over the place and let's start claiming. It didn't just happen in the Americas with the Native Americans. This happened in Europe. Exactly the same thing happened in Europe. You go back to the Neolithic age, then in Britain, in this country, it was a case of trying to cling on to the wild ways. And I believe there was a huge, huge civil war taking place in Britain in the Neolithic age. And some hung on to what they had, which I've also talked about in my book. So do check them out. We Borrow, the last chapter is all about the hanging on to the wild and fighting for it. And it was a bit of a lost cause, really, because civilization was about to claim us. And all power to the gypsies who hang on and hung on and hung on, because they saw the Carnribin. They saw the natural code of law that was everywhere, and they knew that civilization was fast taking us all over, fast making us all into, well, slaves to the rules, I suppose. And this isn't just religion, it's political power as well. So understanding how these labels have been attached to otherworldly beings as we've gone through time is a good thing to look at. Educate yourself with the fact that spirits with the characteristics of the natural world came first and were here for thousands of years. Remember that gods and goddesses were based upon the strength of the human rather than the strength of Carnribin and the beautiful natural world. Gain an understanding of how these things relate to you and how they might affect your life. If you see all the spirits in the things you have around you, and that's in another book. I'm doing a lot of book promotion, aren't I, today? All these spirits are good to think about because that helps you to characterize them. And if you characterize them, your own character can come alive. Go and have a walk by the sea, in the wood, near a stream, somewhere in the natural world where you can reconnect and get a bit of common sense flowing through your veins and think about the spirits and what they mean. It's not a mad thing to do, it's a normal thing to do. We've done it for thousands of years and then suddenly we stopped. And then we thought, oh, they don't exist, do they? It's not true. They do exist. But they exist in a way that relates to the old world. Primary organic thinking, you see, if you start spending some time doing that a little bit more and thinking about the natural world, then it'll take hold. It's simple, it's easy. So yeah, I wanted to present this because it's an important thing, I think, to get it in perspective, how it worked, how it made its way through history. So I hope this finds you well, and thank you so much for your support, and thank you for watching and listening. Take care.